So happy to have Don Rubin here today. Actually, as I was putting together this course, the reading course, there's at least 3 areas I can imagine that I could have asked you to do, Don. It's quite remarkable. Of course, the missing data work is fundamental. The work in causal inference. Today's stuff about propensity scores. So it's amazing that what contributions you've made to applied statistics, and we're happy to talk to you and hear more about the propensity score paper.
Sure, whatever you want to talk about is fine.
So tell us about how that was part of Paul Rosenbaum's thesis. Is that right? That's right.
Yeah, he was one of our really spectacular graduate students, in the sense that where did he come from as an undergraduate? Hampshire College, I think, one of these crazy places that back then, when he was a undergraduate there, they had courses in tie dyeing. Like it was really a very Southern California university at the time.
We have courses in
all this crazy stuff, and I think you got credit. You could make up your own course, get credit for it. So when he applied, it was sort of fascinating because he had such an unusual background. But Paul's a great student.
And what years was he with you?
God, when was he? He was, geez, 70-something, late 70s, I think. Wasn't that right?
We can look it up.
Yeah. So probably safer than relying on an ancient memory.
So tell us more about how the work came about. I mean, the time.
Okay, let's see now. So how do you even work on the propensity score stuff?
Was this before the RCMs or after?
Well, the EM paper was 77. So I went to, I guess my first trip to London was for the EM paper, must have been in 76. Because I'd already published this paper in Biometrica on missing data, inference and missing data, which has an interesting history because I submitted that paper or version of that paper to what I regard as all the standard stat journals, and it had been constantly rejected by everybody. And at the time, one of your former colleagues, Ingram Oakland, was visiting ETS.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember why, but because he was visiting, I decided, okay, I'll throw in some measure theoretic nonsense just to make it formally more complicated. Completely unnecessary, but you can goose anything up with AE and AS everywhere because there were two kinds of measure theory you had to worry about, because there's a standard frequent sample space, but if you're doing Bayesian stuff, likelihood stuff at the same time, you've got parameter space stuff to worry about as well. And the conditions on the parameter space are slightly different for direct likelihood difference than Bayes, because you actually have probability distributions with Bayes, but you don't. So you have to talk about sample spaces and parameter spaces and stuff. So I added all this measure theoretic crap that paper, and it was really garbage, so that Ingram might like it.
Yes.
And of course, when it got submitted there, it was rejected again. And I still remember Ingram's advice, because he was a great character. I mean, he really didn't like statistics at all. He liked doing the details of the stuff, and he suggested that I submit it after being rejected by the Annals and everywhere else to Yiddish Weekly, which was a brag, I guess. He grew up reading when he was in Brooklyn or something like as a kid, and so instead I decided to submit it unchanged, basically, to Biometrica. And David Cox back then was the editor for what, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And he's incredibly efficient because he read everything and basically he used his own judgment. And if he didn't like it, he rejected right away. And if he liked it, he basically sent back a very positive letter. And I still remember the letter that he sent, because the referee was a graduate student of his, Rod Little.
Oh.
And there are two things that have to be fixed on the paper, and then I'll accept it. And one was it has to have discussion by this really interesting graduate student of mine, Rod Little. And the other thing is you have to get rid of all this mother sherry shit. It's just garbage. It's just notational noise. But I worked so hard to put all that stuff in. He said, I don't care. It's completely noise. Just get rid of it. And so that's the story behind that paper, which obviously, not only did it start a long and fruitful friendship with Rod, but also again, I really David Cox is one of my favorite people. So
I think your story about having to put theorems in is unfortunately has not changed in our field, right? It's much easier to get stuff published in the annals, for example, if there's theory, no matter what, whether it's relevant or not to the work.
Yeah, in fact, my impression of most of it is completely irrelevant. And in fact, the little bit that I read, so the computational stuff now, it's also true in the computational machine learning shit.
Yeah.
Put in all sorts of irrelevant crap about rates of convergence, where the rates of convergence have nothing to do with the cost of computing.
Yeah.
You're just doing some counting of steps. It's really silly. But
didn't Jerry Friedman have on his board his rejection letter from JASA once? Jerry had submitted a paper to JASA, Jerry Friedman.
Yep. And
the rejection letter said, the paper is not bad, but if you added a few theorems, it may get accepted.
Might have a better chance.
Well, I once had a paper rejected when I was young from the annals or JASA. Anyway, JASA, and it said, this paper has only one good idea. That was the criticism. One good idea.
That's not bad. I mean, most papers have no good ideas.
That's what I was going to say. That's one more good idea than most of your papers, but I was too young to say. Anyway, so Trevor asked the question, is this the paper with Paul that come before or after the Rubin causal model was developed?
That came after, because I guess the thing that's called the Rubin causal model is for this paper that I wrote in 1970. It was published in 1974, but it was published in Journal of Educational Statistics. No, it wasn't even that. It was in a psychology journal. Because I couldn't get it published anywhere else. And because I was at Educational Testing Service at the time, there was somebody who was on the editorial board of this educational journal who said, "Oh, I can get it published. Just send it to me, and I'll push it through." I don't even remember why he liked it, but that was so that was this 74 paper, which is actually this very simple description of what's called the Rubin causal model or potential outcomes approach. And then Paul was a graduate student, I think a couple of years after that.
How did you get into this area, Don? It seems such a hard problem when you got observational data to try and make causal inference. What got you into it?
Well, I was trying to think about that earlier today. I think it was this. What I don't like about most of statistics and much of the machine learning mathematics is it's so tedious, and the thing that I always sort of preferred or why I liked mathematical thinking at all was the ideas were supposed to be generalizable. They're supposed to be big ideas and there's some relatively simple big idea behind it. In fact, I remember one of your colleagues, who was it? Wonderful guy, David Blackwell. saying because he was on the Harvard visiting committee, and we got along very, very well. And I remember talking about once he said something like, I have a very simple mind. And so I can't stand doing all this complicated mathematical things. So I have to make everything very simple. But when you actually talked to him and looked at what he did, it was all beautiful stuff, mathematically beautiful, really clean, without all this clutter that people now seem to add. And his brain didn't work like that at all. So I really admired him.
But that's something that we both strive for, trying to keep things simple, right? I mean,
yeah, and get rid of the clutter, because but
if it's too cluttered, it's probably not right. If it's too cluttered, it's probably not correct in the sense it's missing the main point, right?
That's right. It's got to be missing the major point. And that I think was one of the key things about working with Paul Rosenbaum too. As a student, we trying to look at what's the big idea here, and it can't be something that's only expressed in 12,000 theorems or something like that. It's got to be something. If it was an important idea, there's got to be something, a simpler way to express it all.
How many theorems have you proven if you published in your life?
Well, probably the most important one was wrong.
Which one was that?
In the EM paper.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right.
Because the main theorem there, and I don't remember who first we misapplied the triangle inequality.
Yeah, who was the?
I think I'm going to blame that on art.
Yeah, that's good. That's fair enough.
If you have a co-author, always blame the senior one. It makes life simpler that way. But we misapplied it, and of course, I think it was Jeff Wu who in a follow-up paper, pointed it out and got it right. But the fact that nobody cared. Yeah. And it has very little influence on the important ideas of the paper, which are conveyed by the examples, and by the generality of the big idea, not by the theorem. The theorem is irrelevant.
So these days, the RCM and propensity scores are pretty much ubiquitous. They're used in all causal inference. How long did it take for them to catch on? I mean, you're talking about early mid-70s when it started.
Yeah, I think they had probably started catching on. Well, I think the propensity score paper, because it had so many applications, was an important reason for it catching on. And for a while, I think there was this competition. I think the competition for the RCA, this Rubin causal model potential outcomes approach, was the graphical stuff. Was the DAG stuff of Judah Pearl, and Pearl's a great character, but I always found just the DAG stuff to be clutter, because it added something that wasn't essential at all. I mean, graphs are fine, but the DAGs, with all their as soon as you get to something in experimental design, for example, split plot models or things like that, complicated not just simple randomization, the whole thing falls apart. The whole simplicity of DAGs goes away. So why keep pursuing it? I don't know.
Now, you brought up Judah Pearl. It seems that also this area is very of causal inference. The personalities involved are very, very strong, and they're more in different fields: computer science, economics, statistics, right?
Yeah.
And it also seems like some of the major work now is done not in statistics, but in economics and econometrics.
Well, I think that actually that goes back to a lot of the really major ideas were from economists, but they had so much clutter. Most of them didn't think in what I'm describing as this, like the Blackwell really clean ideas, and trying to keep it simple. Although there's all this stuff about instrumental variables has really caught on, because it was I guess this. I mean, if you read the economics about instrumental variables, if you go back 50 or 60 years, it's really cluttered with all sorts of garbage ideas. But the essential point is really beautiful.
Yeah.
So but it is cluttered with all sorts of other stuff, which I think that was one of the reasons why the paper with Josh Angus and Guido Imbens caught on so much, is because we really bridged this simplicity of sort of randomization based thinking with the econometric stuff that was full of a lot of clutter. But then when you bridge them, you get rid of the clutter, and I think it makes a very clean idea that really have taken over.
I think the area is like the problems are pretty much solved in this area, or not.
I don't think so. I mean, one of the areas that I think is pretty much wide open. Has to do with all these randomized experiments dealing with people, because you have non-compliance, which is when you're one of the big ties to instrumental variables, but you have complications with non-compliance that arise from all these sort of internet experiments. We can do randomized experiments so quickly now and with such generality that it makes it really easy to do different kinds of. But if you look at that field, it's typically called A/B testing or something.
Okay.
But they have no. I mean, the field generally has no appreciation for experimental design, where you have more than two treatments. And you have all sorts of block structure, and they sort of is an ignorance of the fact that the least squares analysis of a split plot design has two sources of randomization that the old guys got right. They had two separate error terms, but try to bury that within one least squares model doesn't work. And it doesn't work because the technical mathematics doesn't work. The technical mathematics goes through, but it's just wrong if you try to bury it in one model. And I think most of the people who in that field, certainly in economics, some of the good guys understand that. But in computer science, I don't think they do.
Well, I want to ask you a bit about the EM paper. And as part of this series, I tried to track down the source of the Baum-Welsh algorithm. And Baum is deceased. Welsh is about 96 years old, living in Southern California. And I got to talk to one of his best friends, who said he'd like to help you, but he's lost his memory.
Oh,
but he put me on to another friend of his that was who was there at the time when Welsh did the work, who's lost his hearing. So I wasn't able to do a Zoom interview, but I did a sort of email conversation, which will appear on the website.
oh, good.
One thing I learned was that one of the reasons why their papers weren't really published is that they were working for the NSA at the time, so they weren't allowed to publish them. So were you guys aware of the Baum-Welsh work in some way, or as you wrote EM?
I wasn't aware of it, but I did become aware. And there's an interesting. I'm trying to recover the memory, because in his this is coming back now in his discussion of the EM paper, because he was one of the discussants, because we were, I think, probably because Nan was sort of doing the literature review for the paper, because she was at the time a PhD student of arts. And so I think she was aware of that, but his discussion was really sort of pissy.
Yeah, it was, yes.
And I found out later, I think because didn't he have a visiting appointment at Rutgers or something like that? I think in the
Stony Brook, maybe, or maybe Rutgers. Yeah,
I think so. And I think I was there, and he's really pissy there too. When I talked about this stuff,
I was told the reason he was pissy, or that word is that in your paper you kind of dismiss his work in one sentence. Something
yeah, that was probably inappropriate, because I don't think I was aware of how close he was to having the full general idea, because but he had these papers where it was buried in wasn't some Markov process
Yeah.
we had the
Markov
essential,
model, yeah,
we had the essential ideas, but they weren't advertised.
Yeah.
And I think that he had it all, but he wasn't allowed to publish it.
right,
Yeah.
right.
I was at Bell Labs in the mid 80s, and I remember the speech recognition group and modeling group. They had their neck in a knot because they felt the Baum-Welsh algorithm
Yeah.
preceded EM. Yeah.
In fact, I had a personal conversation in Stanford with, what was her name? The female astronaut who what was her name?
It's
The Stanford astronaut.
Sally Ride? No.
Yes,
Yes?
Sally Ride. There was some conference that was at Stanford, must be, I don't know, 40 years ago or something, where Sally Ride was one of the participants. There may have been like 20 people there or something like that. Up on the hill,
Yeah.
overlooking Stanford. And I remember having, there was wine in the evening always, and having this wine induced conversation with Sally Ride. And I was talking about EM algorithm and how you could use it to read. This is back in this before before U2, when we were spying on each other and reading Izvestia and other newspapers from spy planes, and how you could use EM algorithm. And I started describing the EM algorithm to Sally Ride, and Sally Ride said, "How do you know that?" I said, "Well, it's in this paper." He said, "You shouldn't know that. It's classified." and then you get this mystery that so all the right people knew it, but you couldn't talk about it. They weren't supposed to talk about it. So
Yeah, it's
Crazy.
Yeah.
Funny stories.
Yeah. Well, it's been great chatting with you, Don. And thanks for sharing some of your memories. I'm sure the students will enjoy this as we
Okay,
are.
great.
Yeah.
You can hang in a minute after. We'll just turn the recording off.
Yeah.
Okay.
And no, this is kind of.